All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in a series on DCA's housing resources. My name is Beth Evanson, and I am DCA's regional representative that covers Region 5, so the Northeast Georgia region. I'm joined by Kathy Papa, my counterpart in the North Georgia Mountains region. We are excited to have you join us today as we hear from DeTanya Lewis, the CHIP Program Manager, and Glenn Misner, the Director of Cdbg Field Services and the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. Before we begin, I want to go over just a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available on DCA's YouTube channel. We'll also send out the presentations to registered participants afterwards. To avoid disruptions, all cameras and microphones have been muted and you will not have the ability to unmute yourself. However, we encourage you to ask questions, and to do so, if you'll just enter them in the chat box, Kathy and I will monitor and make sure that they are read to the presenters. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to DeTanya as she talks to us about the CHIP program.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. My name is DeTanya Lewis. I am the CHIP manager. We have 2 program staff, and we're looking right now. We're actually getting ready to expand CHIP a little bit, so this is the perfect time to give everyone a little bit more insight into CHIP and how we're growing. So what is CHIP? CHIP is an acronym for Community Home Investment Program. We're funded with federal home dollars. We are not a direct beneficiary program. We average 10 to 15 grants a year. We award roughly around 5 to 7 million statewide annually, and we provide affordable housing across the state of Georgia. So we meet the housing needs of the state by offering new construction of single-family homes. We also offer owner-occupied housing rehab, and we try to be a resource center for residents across the state that are seeking housing assistance. We regularly get calls from homeowners seeking assistance with their housing rehab, or home buyers who are looking for down payment assistance, as well as development authorities seeking funds, nonprofits seeking funds. So we try to provide, if we can assist you with CHIP, then we try to provide resources that are available throughout DCA and across the state. So some of our CHIP accomplishments: we have awarded over 60 million since 2010. Our awards have been to public housing authorities, local governments, as well as nonprofits. And each award averages 4 to 7 households that are assisted using CHIP funds. So as you can see, we've reached quite a few people across the state of Georgia, and we're always looking to expand our reach into different regions as much as possible. So we appreciate what we're doing today. So just to give you a little background of how our grant schedule works, especially if you're looking to submit an application. Our applications are normally due, for the last few years, they've been due on September 30th. So that, well, not due on September 30th, that's the date that we release our applications, and they're due on January 30th. And so usually around February through April, we're reviewing, scoring, and then we try to make our, we release our press release to announce our awards. And through May through August, what we utilize that time is for our grantees that have received their new award. That's the time where they're getting their signatures, as well as clearing conditions, because this is a federal program. There are quite a few federal compliance issues that we have to address, as well as some state laws that we have to adhere to. So we try to give our grantees enough time to gather the information that they need so that they can eventually get their notice to proceed. And their notice to proceed normally starts, well, the past few years it's began in August, but this year we extended it out to begin on September 1st the award would begin September 1st. And now that we're reviewing CHIP, and we see that sometimes it takes a little bit more time to get homeowners qualified, to get homes constructed because of all of the costs that the cost overruns that we're experiencing right now, that we've extended our grant award to 3 years, and we're allowing up to a 1 year extension. So what we're trying to do is roughly keep our grant award around 4 years, because HUD has a rule where we have a completion deadline, and even though it doesn't necessarily always apply for owner-occupied housing, what we're looking to do is just kind of keep all of it in line with our development as well as our rehab portion. So for our 2022 application round, we awarded $7 million to 15 grantees, and our applicants included local governments and nonprofits. Normally, we would have maybe 1 or 2 public housing authorities that apply as well, but this year we were more, and it was kind of a little different this year because we had more local governments applying. Normally, we have a good mixture of nonprofits as well as local governments. So it's really good to see, more governments are reaching out and, applying for assistance. So as I've stated before, local governments, public housing authorities, and nonprofits are all eligible to apply for CHIP dollars. Our CHIP application, we have 2 applications. We have an owner-occupied housing rehab application as well as a single-family new construction for home ownership application. Any applicant, you're welcome to apply for both, but you'll only be selected for one. And new to, I believe we started this last year was our first year where we've actually started using the Graham portal to submit applications. So we review the applications in our application portal now. Before, all applications were emailed in. So with the CHIP application, we have 4 categories. We look at your budget, we look at your need for your community, your capacity to administer the CHIP award, as well as planning for affordable housing. So the budget and leverage is pretty self-explanatory. What we're looking at is how are you leveraging any funds towards your project? If you're owner-occupied rehab or local government, we normally don't get as much leverage because with this, once you rehab the homeowner's home, there's no income that you're going to receive out of this. So a lot of times local governments are just looking to assist their residents in their area. And so what we ask for match with owner-occupied rehab is more or less what can you provide, such as can you waive the permit fees, any type of fees? Do you have staff that's assistant? And with new construction, of course, we only allow for a certain amount of money. So in your awards, so when you're building out new construction, we're looking at how much are you leveraging, and that's when leverage plays a higher cost, because with new construction, you're going to need more funds in order to complete the build. So what your in-kind can be the land value if you already have the land, and also again any type of services that you're kicking in your staff's time. If you're a local government, are you waiving any type of fees? All of this will count towards your leverage. And also, as it says, for tips, it's always best to contact a local grant administrator because they have experience and they have the knowledge base to help you leverage your application to help you as far as to look more favorable when it comes to when we're reviewing the application. So we're looking at capacity. One of the, a new category to our capacity is that we have set aside a few awards to be awarded to new applicants. And with that, it's to give them kind of that advantage that they wouldn't necessarily have because they're competing against other grantees that have been awarded CHIP in past years. So in order to allow new grantees, new local government applicants to get their foot in the door, is to set aside a few of our awards for governments that have been instrumental in trying to develop their community as much as they can without having any assistance. So they have done code enforcements, or they've done demolition, or they've had community cleanup days where they're participating and doing whatever they can in order to assist their residents of that area without, the assistance of state or local or federal funding. So we're looking at those applicants so that we can look at them differently than what we would with other CHIP applicants. But also a category of this, it's not available to nonprofits. And it's also, you also must procure a grant administrator to be eligible for this special set aside. So the normal capacity, what we're looking at in our CHIP application is the applicant's experience with grant activities. So like I said before, that's you score higher if you have experience with grants. It doesn't necessarily have to be CHIP, but it could be if you've received home from a PJ in your local area. And this is for nonprofits as well as local governments. If you receive funding, home funding maybe from a larger metro area, then that will count, towards your activity. Or you've had projects where you've used your own local funds or your own funding to build out or provide rehab, and you were able to start that project and complete it on time. And one of the things that we look at is your narrative. Are you providing a good enough narrative that we can actually see the picture of what you've completed, as well as did you finish on time? Did you start on time? Did you finish on time? Did you complete it within budget? All of those factors help with your scoring. So try to be as detailed as possible. And also staff experience. Are you using a grant administrator? Are you using a regional commission staff that could assist you, that will assist you? And also attach, as I stated before, attach the narrative, resumes, and procurement process. So you're basically painting, because we don't know, you have to paint the picture so that we can follow and make sure that we see that, okay, you have actually completed this, you've actually, been able to build out houses without, with the assistance of funding. And so we just want to see a picture. And a lot of times we can have applicants and we don't really have that full picture. So basically with your capacity, just make sure you show that you demonstrate that you do have the capacity to be able to complete the award and complete our award on time. Also, what we look at is need. We're looking at your target area, your geographic priority. Do you have underfunded areas? Do you, are they in a federally declared disaster area, as well as the poverty rate? And you've received more points for a higher poverty rate for owner-occupied rehab, because we understand that a lot of people, they don't have the resources available to fix their homes, and local governments don't necessarily have the resources available as well. And that's where CHIP comes in. but you receive more points for lower poverty rate for new construction, because we want to make sure that when that homeowner buys that home, that they're able to maintain it over the years. And we want to make sure that you also have home buyers in that area, so that when you actually build the homes, you have home buyers available to actually purchase the home. And the final category is planning. So if you're part of GIC, you receive up to 5 points for participation. And if you are an alumni, we want to see your certification. We're starting to look at that differently as well. And also, we want you to have an affordable housing plan. As a nonprofit, we have 5 factors that we list in the application that you can check off and add to you creating an affordable housing plan. And for city and local governments, I know a lot of you have plans that you've created for Cdbg, as well as some have their consolidated plans or annual plans that they develop. So we also can look at that, but you also need to make sure that you mention that you are furthering affordable housing efforts if you want to count it towards your CHIP application. So with owner-occupied housing rehab, we award up to $400,000 for housing rehab grants. We allow up to, it's actually gone up. So here it says up to $60,000, but we're allowing up to $75,000. If you have a home that goes above and beyond that, you just have to send in a request to increase the amount, because we do recognize in certain areas, $75,000 is not enough to rehab certain homes, and that's fine. We just ask that you submit a request so that we know that you are going above. And we allow $4,000 in project delivery costs for the grantee. And when we provide the housing rehab, if we have rehabbed a home and we've put in $50,000, we're placing a lien on that home. It's not a repayment, but what it is that we're holding that home affordable for at least 5 years to make sure that the owner doesn't take the increase in equity and walk away and buy a new home. We want to make sure that that home stays affordable. So we place the lien only for 5 years for owner-occupied rehab, but it's just to make sure that the home isn't sold within the next year or so. And so what we look at when you are assessing whether or not a homeowner qualifies, you have to look at the income of the household. So this will be available, this presentation will be available to you. So if you want to prepare yourself and know more about the program, I'm going to make sure that Kathy and Beth have a copy of this web presentation. But I wanted to give you information about what qualifies, who qualifies. So we're looking at the household of the income of the entire household. And you can find the income limits on HUD Exchange. And also for the household, it has to still be below 80% AMI of that area. So the income limits can be found on HUD Exchange, and also how to assess income can be found on HUD Exchange as well. In fact, HUD has an income calculator that will assist you in determining a household's income. Also, you have to make sure that the owner or the resident actually owns the home. So HUD has several different types of deeds that are acceptable that you would have to review to make sure that that homeowner is actually the owner. And we have many cases where the homes are, especially in smaller areas, smaller rural areas, where the homeowner has actually inherited the home, but they may not necessarily be on the deed. So HUD also recognizes that that happens. So they've allowed for different ways to assess a deed to make sure that that homeowner it's actually, the home is actually eligible for our program. And also a part of owner-occupied rehab, you have to look at lead paint requirements. Some grantees choose not to rehab homes that are older because you have to deal, or homes that are pre-1978 because you have to deal with lead. But if you do, just make sure that you follow all the requirements of lead, because we have to make sure that we are in compliance when dealing with lead.
Tanya, we have a question for you in the chat.
Sure.
Is the $4,000 per home set or based on the rehab cost up to $4,000?
Set. It's set.
Thank you.
So we talked about the homeowner's lien. It's a no interest deferred payment loan. It's only 5 years. It's 10 years if we have to complete a complete reconstruction of the home. It's forgivable and payable only at sale or refinance. So like I said earlier, if the homeowner decides to sell their home within the second year, then whatever they received, a portion of that loan will be payable back to CHIP. And that's called a recapture. And it's not paid if income eligible family members inherits a home, because sometimes the homeowner dies and the people or the children or the family that's living in the home may inherit the home, but they have to be income eligible. For new construction, we award up to $600,000 for new construction or reconstruction. And with this $600,000, that's where I was saying with the leverage earlier, that it's not a lot of money in order to build out homes, especially in this market. So leverage plays a heavier role with new construction, because you have to bring more money to the table in order to qualify, not necessarily to qualify, but to be awarded, because it is competitive. And the $600,000 is used to acquire. You can acquire the land, or you can acquire a home and rehabilitate the home. And you could use the land to newly construct a single family unit. And it has to be sold to low to moderate. It's actually very low to low income home buyers, because 80% AMI, I believe, qualifies as low income. And it's being sold to single family homeowners. And what we're looking at is you can build out a single family, or you can build out a townhomes, or you can build out quads, but it can't exceed that 4 units. So I know a lot of applicants now are looking at duplexes. They're looking at triplexes, which are normally, or townhomes. So you can build out any of those, but it cannot exceed 4 units. So they can be attached, but they have to be sold as single family units, and it can only be 4 units. So your partners for new construction can include developers, local government, building inspectors, housing counseling providers, as well as lenders. So financing considerations and underwriting for our CHIP rules: when you're building out your home and you're acting as your developer, or your own developer, or you are hiring a developer, up to 15% of the home costs, or up to $40,000 is allowed for your developer subsidy to cover the construction costs. And we allow up to $14,999 for home buyer subsidy. And with that home buyer subsidy, we've actually looked at going up above and beyond that. But the $14,999 is to keep the home affordable for 5 years. Anything $15,000 and above will trigger a 10 to 20-year affordability for that home and for that homeowner. So, and again, the same structure applies. If the homeowner sells the home during that affordability period, a portion of the lien is burned off annually. So if they decide to move in the 5th year, they'll only owe what? If it's a 10-year lien, then they'll only owe half of what we provided them as a subsidy. And also, when you're building new construction, you have to keep in mind, and this actually applies to owner-occupied. HUD has a spreadsheet, and they've done all of their formulas to determine how much you can sell a home for in a certain area. So, like the Metro Atlanta area, the home you may be able to build a home and sell it for $300,000. But you could build that same home in maybe say Athens, but you can only sell it for $200,000. And those are not actual numbers, but that's just to show you with HUD, we have actual sales price that we have to adhere to, we can't exceed. And even when we're looking at owner occupied rehab, there is an after rehab value that we have to make sure that you don't exceed. So when you're rehabbing, you can't do a lot of extravagant additions or a lot of too much work where that home value would exceed the area's value. It still has to be around 95% of the area value in order for it to qualify after you rehab it. So that's one of the things you have to keep in mind before you start to rehab a home. That HUD has value limits on how much we can actually, because we don't want to cost out the neighborhood as well. So home buyer requirements, one of the biggest things that I think we have to make sure that we are stressing to our home buyers is that they need home buyer pre-purchase counseling, and that is a requirement by HUD, and also that the counselor must be HUD certified. So before, I think people could go, home buyers could go to a home buyer counselor, but they weren't necessarily certified. HUD is requiring that now that they are certified, and you must pre-qualify your home buyers. We have to underwrite each home buyer, as well as we have to look at your project locations considerations. Is it in a neighborhood revitalization area? We're providing affordable options in unaffordable neighborhoods, and home eligibility always needs to meet our environmental criteria. And if you build a home and you haven't sold it within 9 months, then we have to convert, well, not we, you would have to convert that home to rental. We don't necessarily do that, but we want to keep in mind that that is a HUD regulation. And so now that we are actually putting things into IDIS more strategically because of HUD regulations, we have to make sure that we are paying attention once you complete and you receive your certificate of occupancy and we've completed that final draw, that we have to make sure that that home is sold to a homeowner within 9 months, or we will have to start looking at rental options. So we talked about the affordability period and how to, this will tell you how to monitor your affordability. It's best to, for me, has always been to send out a do not forward, return to sender stamp. That helps because if someone is renting out their home, you will know. But it's important that you follow up annually with the homeowners to make sure that they're still in the home. And that is a HUD requirement of the program for home, is that we monitor our affordability period. So Just once you have completed your process, it doesn't end just because you've sold the homes or you've completed the rehab. You still have to monitor the affordability period. So that completes my portion, and I am right on time. If you have any questions, you can contact me, or you can contact my director, Samantha, or you can contact the CHIP email. We have a CHIP email. You can find it on our DCA website. And that's it. So Glenn, I think that you can take control, or I can stop presenting.
Thank you, Tanya. That was great.
Thank you. A lot of information.
Okay, I will take over if hopefully everyone can hear me. And let me get my presentation up and running. And good morning. Just somebody tell me that I'm not talking to no one here. Can everybody hear me?
You're good.
Thank you much. All right, I appreciate it. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And I think probably everyone is familiar with DCA to some extent. I looked at briefly at some of the folks who are participating, and I see a lot of old friends on there and some folks that are friends to be with DCA and the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is what I'm here to talk about today. Now, Tanya gave a great presentation about CHIP, which is specifically a housing program. And Cdbg can do housing activities as well as some other things. But before I get into it, I just want to run through some of the pictures that I have amassed over the many years that I've been with DCA. These are all actual places in the state of Georgia that most of which I've been to, certainly I've seen, and after my experience has shown me that, any town you go to in Georgia will have some, if not most, of the problems that you're seeing here. These kind of things are problems that have not only to do with housing, but public infrastructure and public facilities as well. So Cdbg is a program that y'all can use to try to take care of some of the problems like these pictures illustrate in your community. And basically Cdbg has been around since 1974. Been a long time in operation. There have been several changes to it throughout the years, but one thing remains the same, and that the primary objective of Cdbg is to develop communities and expand economic opportunities, principally for persons of low and moderate income. Okay, and Tanya talked about some of that as well, and the Cdbg income limits are the exact same as the CHIP and across most of the HUD programs. Now, for the state Cdbg program, any non-entitlement local government that's in good standing with DCA can apply for the program. Most of the larger, especially around Metro Atlanta, the larger cities and counties, generally speaking, a city 50,000 or more in population, or a county 200,000 or more in population, are going to get money directly from HUD as what's called the Cdbg entitlement. All the other folks in local government, all other local governments, either county or cities, can apply to the state Cdbg program. And the local governments can implement a number of different activities as long as they further the national objectives of Cdbg. And there are only three. The majority benefit to low and moderate income persons. Again, that would be 80% or below of the median income in the community. And as Tanya mentioned, those are published by HUD every year. They are updated. The second national objective is the prevention or elimination of slums and blight. And last, meeting an urgent need that pose a threat to the health and welfare of the community. So for CDBG, under our program, we raised the limits that you could apply for last year under last year's program to $1 million for a single activity CDBG grant. For the two other set-aside programs that we have, which are the Employment Incentive Program, EIP, and Redevelopment Fund, we left those limits at $750,000, which is what the old CDBG limit was. Now, for a multi-activity CDBG, and I'll talk about what that means in a little while, we'll go up to 1.25 million. For regional cooperation projects, up to 2 million, and for innovative projects, up to 2 million. We do have an innovative round that just started, and CDBG, unfortunately for everyone listening, the bad news is that the applications for this year's competition were due last Friday. But the good news is that we will have another round next year, and trust me, a year sounds like a long time to pull a CDBG application together. Now's the time to start planning it, because it does take quite a bit to actually pull a competitive application together. So under the annual competition, which is the main part of our CDBG funding, again, single activity up to $1 million, and for neighborhood revitalization or quote unquote housing programs, we will do rehabilitation of substandard housing units, reconstruction of dilapidated housing units. You can acquire property. You can relocate folks that are affected by the program. You can do demolition of blighting structures in the neighborhood. There are several other housing activities that we'll get into. But one thing with CDBG is not strictly a housing program. You can also do infrastructure improvements in smaller target areas that are low and moderate income neighborhoods. And those generally we see are sewer, water, or street and drainage improvements, as well as public buildings. We see a lot of call for construction or rehabilitation of health departments, senior centers, community centers, and Head Start buildings. The other criteria for CDBG is what we call a multi-activity program, and that's generally housing activities plus infrastructure activities in a particular target area. And again, the limit for that is 1.25 million. So again, you apply for the annual competition once a year. The last couple of years, they've been due in June. And again, the current round applications were due to our office by June 3rd. The applications are all online. The due date for next year is to be determined. It'll probably be around the same time, but that is to be determined. The set-aside programs, as I said, for the Redevelopment Fund, which is a program that addresses slum and blight, as well as the Employment Incentive Program, which is intended to create jobs that are made available to low and moderate income folks. Those are set-aside programs, and that's a rolling application. You can apply for that at any time. Now, for CDBG, the applicant must be a local government. That's in the CDBG regulations. We have no ability to change that. So that's one of the differences between CDBG and CHIP, is that a nonprofit can apply for CHIP, but a nonprofit would have to go through a local government to apply for CDBG, and the local government would have to be the applicant of record. And generally speaking, what we see is the grant application, writing and administration are done by either folks in the local government, perhaps a regional commission, or a private grant administrator. And any of these are legitimate. Again, the applicant itself must be a local government. and the local government may channel funds through the a nonprofit, a development authority, so on and so forth. So let's talk about what we can do under neighborhood revitalization, or what, that's our term for doing housing improvement programs. Rehabilitation, to repair or bring to code existing substandard housing unit, and we will use CDBG to do either owner or a renter-occupied unit. A renter-occupied unit requires that the renter is, and the unit is available to low and moderate income folks, and that the owner puts up 50% of the funding for the cost of the rehabilitation. And that's, it can be a little bit discouraging for a landlord, but especially given the prices these days, if I was to put up 50 cents and get a 100% match, another 50 match from another source, I'd jump all over that. It's a pretty good deal, and we do require, again, some strings that go along with the requirement of the 50-50 match, but we can talk about that more in the future. For reconstruction, and that's where the unit is so beyond help that it's unfeasible to rehab. It'll cost more than it would to rebuild it. And reconstruction is basically to demolish and construct a new unit on the same site, and we limit that to owner-occupied units only. Okay, this is not considered new construction. I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. You can acquire real property, and for CDBG, acquisition of dilapidated housing, to clear it with CDBG funds is an eligible cost. You can also acquire property to do public infrastructure, to obtain right-of-way, or to obtain easements to get the public infrastructure improvements. Disposition, and these are costs that are incidental to disposing of property that are acquired with CDBG funds. Now, code enforcement is also an eligible activity. There's a but that goes with that, because CDBG is a limited time frame award, and code enforcement, of course, hopefully is an ongoing process in any community. And a local government that proposes to use code enforcement would really have to explain to us how it'll work in a CDBG target area and how it would be sustained beyond the life of a CDBG award. And again, we can do clearance of dilapidated structures and outbuildings and other blighting influences in a target area, interim assistance, which is, if you have an area that has a lot of lots that are overgrown, for instance, or have a lot of litter, or it has turned into a de facto dump in a particular target area, which obviously is a blighting influence in a community. Interim assistance can go in before any of the major work is done and just start cleaning up that problem. Relocation is an eligible activity, either temporary or permanent. In other words, if you have a CDBG project that is going to displace people, which is possible sometimes when you're doing road improvements or other things where you have to take a particular property that's occupied, you would have to provide relocation benefits to the owners who are being displaced. You can also do temporary relocation, which is to just move folks out until their house is fixed and then move them back in. Temporary relocation is not mandatory for owner-occupied units, but it is for tenant-occupied units. In some of the units that we serve, as our population ages, there are units that require modifications to accommodate folks with handicaps and other issues. In other words, widening doorways to accommodate a wheelchair, for example, or to make bathrooms handicap accessible, by installing bars, the raised toilets, so on and so forth. These are the kind of improvements that are also eligible with CDBG. Now, new construction, again, this is a difference between CHIP and CDBG. New construction generally is not an eligible CDBG cost unless it's undertaken by a HUD-approved community-based development organization. And again, as your community starts trying to digest all the information you're receiving today, if you want to talk more about that, please please get in touch with me directly, and I'll be happy to go over all these things. But again, new construction generally is not eligible with CDBG funds where it is with CHIP. So eligible activities, again, under neighborhood revitalization, one of the things that we don't see much of, but that is an eligible activity, is home buyer assistance, where you're going to help folks get into home ownership. And that home buyer assistance can comprise of a number of different activities, which is down payment assistance. And there are, if you call it down payment assistance, there are some restrictions under CDBG. You can help with closing costs. You can help with a principal reduction payment, which is basically providing a payment to the owner of the property to lessen the cost of a mortgage for the person that's the prospective buyer of that property. Or you can do an interest buy down. Now, that hasn't been a big necessity for the last several years because interest rates for mortgages have been at historic lows. However, we are seeing an increase in those rates. So an interest buy down can help make a unit more affordable for a low and moderate income person. One note for sure is that in order to avoid the mess that we ran into beginning in 2008, DCA policies mandates the use of fixed rate mortgages on all CDBG funded projects. Those generally are traditional 20, 25, 30-year mortgages at a fixed interest rate, no balloon payments, no adjustable rate mortgages, none of those products that kind of entice people to get in, and then 3 years down the road, you find that the house is no longer affordable, and it's subject to foreclosure because the owner could no longer afford mortgage payments. A multi-activity generally, again, is housing activities, any of the ones we already talked about. That also would include public facility activities. Water and sewer, street and drainage are the most common ones. We have seen applications come in every now and again for a building in a particular target area that serves that community. And again, the raised limit is 1.25 million. The activities all need to be in the same target area, and they all need to be interrelated, and you need to convince us in your application that it's a comprehensive neighborhood revitalization program that will address most, if not all, the needs in that particular target area. Okay, so that's basically CDBG. One of the other things that DCA offers is an incentive for a community to go above and beyond simply applying for funding through DCA. And we call that the Revitalization Area Strategy Program, or RAS. And it's a designation that rewards local efforts for a long-term vision for the area that's included in a well-defined area that includes comprehensive activities that are addressed not only with CDBG, but with other resources as well. It normally will include grassroots involvement from the residents of the area, commitment from other funding sources besides just DCA and federal funding, and documentation of those commitments from the local stakeholders. And again, part of that is that a local urban redevelopment plan must be adopted by the community. That's the threshold requirement for RAS. Now, DCA has nothing to do with urban redevelopment laws in the state of Georgia, and those laws are found at the official code of Georgia as annotated 3661. Those are the laws that talk about what communities can do with urban redevelopment planning. In addition, the area that you're proposing for RAS area has to be in census block, one block group or more than one block group. They all have to have 20% or greater poverty level. And that information can all be found on our DCA website and our mapping tools. We are looking for strong local partnerships that focus local resources within that area as well. And RAS also requires the same public participation or citizens participation process that CDBG requires. The application is submitted to DCA at the same time that the CDBG applications are due, and it's designated by DCA through that process, and again, it's due at the same time as the annual competition. So what are the rewards? If you are a regular old community that has applied for CDBG and you've been successful, you've been awarded, generally that means the next year you are not eligible to apply for CDBG because we say that you have to sit out a year. If you are a designated RAS community, we waive that and say you can apply every year as long as you are making progress through the timeliness criteria that's published on, through our programs for the current CDBG. You can apply every year. It also can provide bonus points on your CDBG annual competition application. As I said, it is just that. It's a competition. All the applications come in. They are broken into basically 3 different review panels. The review panels take a look at the application, read it cover to cover very exhaustively, believe me, and the application is scored as such. And all the applications then, starting with the highest scoring application down through the end of our money, are scored. So 20 points in CDBG may not sound like a lot because at this point there's over 300 bonus points or 300 points available under the CDBG application. But I will tell you that the last one funded and the first one that's not funded, the difference can be as low as a percentage of 1 point. So 20 points can be huge in the annual competition. And the RAS designation is effective for 3 years. So I showed you some pictures at the beginning of this, and these pictures are the exact, that street on the left is what that project turned into of the picture on the right. That's in the city of Rockmart. A wonderful transition from what was a pretty worn down road and area into a beautiful housing complex. And that one used several different DCA funding sources, including CDBG CHIP. Some NSP money went in there, so on and so forth. This is just a straight housing rehab down in Victoria Place in Thomasville, which was a very comprehensive project in a neighborhood that the city of Thomasville basically transformed. The picture on the left is in Macon, Georgia. And while CDBG is not eligible in Macon because they're an entitlement community, this was a LIHTC project that used some NSP, but the dramatic difference between what was an abandoned 50s public housing project into a beautiful little neighborhood with brand new housing, again, dramatic difference in the area itself. The pictures on the left here, the city of Washington. These pictures are on the old side. They have built several houses. I haven't been to Washington in a while, and I suspect that street you see where we did the infrastructure improvements with curb and the street and sidewalk are probably filled with houses at this point. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions you may have right now, I'll certainly try to answer them. My contact information is there. So as you're working towards a potential project, please feel free to contact me. The upcoming events will be in the fall or beginning of winter. We will hold a Cdbg applicants workshop. I don't know at this point whether we will do it in person. I hope we do. It's been several years since we were all able to do it in person, but we will have a Cdbg applicants workshop where we will talk about your eligible activities and really get down into what makes an eligible Cdbg application competitive. So we look forward to that. With that, I will end my presentation, turn it back to Kathy and Beth, and
Thank
we'll
you,
go
Glenn.
from there. And
We-
thank you all.
We do have a question about down payment assistance.
Sure.
It's, do you have to have housing or housing assistance in your service delivery strategy for the down payment assistance project for Cdbg?
It's a very good question, and service delivery strategy is not my area of expertise. I will say that you do have to have language in your SDS that you are going to provide housing assistance and a kind of an umbrella of wording as to what type of assistance you are going to be trying to provide. I don't think you have to get into specifics, but whoever has that question, we can we can talk offline and get into the exact details of what's required under the SDS provisions here at DCA.
That sounds good. We also have a question for Tanya, going back to your presentation. The question is, can you provide an example of how a local government applicant, not a housing authority, can structure an application for new single-family housing under CHIP?
I would suggest just follow the application, and we provide examples in the application. I think the biggest thing is to have the structure of your development in line so that when we review your application, we see the steps and how you will complete your project. I don't necessarily think that we have any, we don't look at anything outstanding as far as having these best practices. It's really more so the application itself and how well you've been able to present and support your application. So if you say that you're going to provide new construction, then you just show us how you're going to do it, how you're going to make it happen. Do you have a grant administrator? Do you have home buyers lined up? Do you have resources? Do you have partners? Will you have a developer? So those sorts of things you would consider when you are building out your application. And I would suggest just follow the application because we kind of walk you through it. And if you answer the questions, then that will always help your application, because you'll be amazed at how many applicants don't necessarily always follow the application and actually answer the questions that we have we've listed in our application.
That's great. That's very helpful. All right. I don't see any other questions in the chat unless you see any, Beth or anybody else. All right, cool. Well, we definitely want to thank you all for joining us today. We especially want to thank Tanya and Glenn for presenting such valuable information for us. As Beth mentioned, the recording of today's session will be available on DCA's YouTube channel. Please also be on the lookout for our next regional housing webinar. Beth and I are planning it for September 7th, and it's going to be on homelessness prevention and also the Emergency Solutions Grant. But as always, please don't hesitate to contact us at DCA if there's any way we can assist your community. We definitely want to thank you for participating in programs like this, and we look forward to our next one on September 7th. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.